Welcome, affiliated listeners. We are so excited to have a personal friend, an amazing human, just an amazing human, Paul Hoffman, on the podcast today. It's just going to be Paul and I. First off, Paul, how are you doing today?
You know, if I was any better, Kyle, I'd be you.
That is just a sample of one of the many things that makes Paul so great. You can't help but not feel good. I just feel good anytime around you. You're just a ray of positivity brighter than the sun. So thanks so much for being here. And today, for all the listeners out here, we have really exciting things. We're going to cover something that you've really probably never heard before. You've definitely heard and experienced it, but you probably haven't talked to somebody that creates it. Because Paul has a very interesting background. He actually got started through the world of music, which led him to his online business today. And he spent a little bit of time in there in the 80s and I think even to the 90s doing something called writing jingles for some of the largest companies in the world and the biggest ad campaigns that we've probably all experienced, and could probably YouTube right now and find the stuff that Paul has done, which I know most of us can't say. So really, really excited to talk to you, Paul, and really understand kind of the science behind what makes a great jingle and how that could be translated into the marketing you're using today, but as well as the marketing that our listeners and really everybody out there could potentially be using. So with that, just to kind of get things rolling, Paul, what I'd love to do is just walk me through a little bit about kind of your background in terms of specifically how you found yourself in music, and then how eventually that stumbled into writing jingles, because it's a hell of a story. I've heard it before, and I'm so excited for everyone else to hear it as well.
Kyle, first of all, I appreciate you and ClickBank so much. I mean, ClickBank is such an awesome platform for anybody in business who's trying to get their message out on a big and wide scale. And you and your team and the people that take care of people like me who doesn't really know what they're doing is just extraordinary. So I just want to thank you for that, brother, and thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. And I'm excited to talk about this stuff because the whole idea of writing jingles is an interesting concept. And it's funny, Kyle, because I used to think oh man, somebody said, "What do you do?" Well, I write jingles, and I kind of would say it in such a way that almost I wasn't proud of it at some point. And then I kind of realized, I said, you know what, man, I'm actually changing lives, okay, with what I do and how I do it. And so here's kind of just a quick backstory of how I got into it, if that's to answer that question. So I went to college on a basketball scholarship. Wanted to be a pro basketball player. Whether or not I could have been, I don't know, but it was my game. I loved it. And then I remember, and this is important for all marketers as well, this concept that I'm going to just share real briefly. Everything in life is a defining moment. Okay, so today is a defining moment for me. This is a defining moment to talk to Kyle and to tell my story so I can share what I do and hopefully empower and inspire people to truly step into who they are. So I remember when I went to college on a basketball scholarship, as I said, I went on the court the first day of practice, bro. I looked around and I said, these guys are good. Now, here's what that meant to me right there. It's like I needed to up-level my game. So all the marketers that are listening here, you need to up-level your game, okay? Because there's a lot of noise out there, as you well know. So what I tell people is, if all the noise is going right, and Kyle knows this about me, if all the noise is going right, I'm going left, okay? Because I'm looking to create my own noise. So if you can create your own noise, then you can bring the originality into it and the opportunity to really own who you truly are, and then give people the permission to do that as well. And then obviously you'll create your marketing copy strategies, systems, and so forth based around that. Because I think, or at least it's my belief today, that there is so much going on out in the world. There's so much competition for your eyeballs and for your clicks and whatever you want to call it, that if you're going to just be the same old, then people are going to go, seen that already, and move on.
Yeah.
But if you got something that's really unique, then they're going to take the time to stop and listen. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I love that, especially when you reference it in terms of walking on a college campus, getting ready to play basketball, knowing that, hey, I'm going to be in the NBA. I'm going to be a professional basketball player. To that point in your life, you'd been the best at what you did, probably in every single scenario. And finally, you walk on a court and you realize that you're not anymore. And so I think when you talk about being, you walk into a room, all of a sudden people could do the same skill that you do that much better, meaning that if you don't innovate and create at a different path than what they're doing, you'll only ever be not as good as them because they're forging the path and you just have to walk in those footsteps. And I think that's a great thing with marketing where there's concepts that are kind of the same and they've been the same for a really long time, but the people that become those next professional players, right, or whatever, oftentimes are the ones that could, kind of create a little bit different, take a different path. If you're following what everyone else is doing, remember, if there's people that are already doing it better than you, they're probably going to keep doing it better than you if you don't try and innovate and change differently. So I just think it's a really great metaphor and definitely a fantastic point. So with that though, going back to your story, so you're walked on campus that first day. You're like, oh man, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was.
Oh man, that's exactly what I said. These guys are good, and to use your word, and I love this word, but I didn't innovate. I didn't up level my game. So I was really good in high school, man. I mean, I was the guy, if you will. Now I'm in college, and I'm not the guy. Although I could have been the guy if I applied, executed, and implemented. Two words I love to use in marketing: execution and implementation. But I didn't. So what happened was I ended up giving up on myself. Okay, which was a defining moment. Making an excuse, and everybody makes excuses. All marketers make excuses. Why didn't this one sell? Well, because of blah, 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 blah. The truth of the matter is, if you want to make excuses, that's great. I always tell people there's two forms of an excuse, Kyle. There's the excuse you make, and then there's the excuse you make for the excuse. Because we all do that, right? And so I ended up quitting school, and real briefly, I got a gig as a roadie for a rock band called Edgar Winter's White Trash. Some of you might know who that is. And when my buddy said to me, hey, man, why don't you come with me and work as a roadie? I said, Neil, what's a roadie? Right? And he said, you drive equipment around the country setting up stages. I said, I've never set up an amplifier in my life. He said, don't worry, we'll have a lot of fun. And he was absolutely right. So I traveled around the country. I drove a big U-Haul truck around the country setting up stages with my partner, Ashley, who was also a roadie with me. And make a long story short, we had an awesome time. We opened up for many, many great rock bands you all know. And that journey lasted about 7 years. And that journey ended with me being Pink Floyd's tour manager. Okay, now that's pretty impressive to most people when I say that. For me, it's like I have this expression because I'm from New York. I say, well, that and 50 cents will get me on the subway. Meaning, and again, another marketing marketing idea is don't rest on your laurels. Okay, don't rest on what you think is, oh man, this has been working. Let me just no, innovate, like Kyle says. If you innovate, you're always sharpening the sword. You're always thinking about new ways to do it. So then I ended up, after 7 years on the road, I decided to go back to school to get a law degree. I had to finish my undergraduate, of course, and so I was going to NYU. And I'm a big proponent, and again, I think this is important in marketing as well. I'm a big proponent of putting yourself in the energy and the frequency of what you want to create, right? So I studied at the law library every day because I wanted to feel what it was like, the big mahogany desks, all the case study books. I just wanted to feel what it was like to be a lawyer, right? And so I studied at the law library every day. And then finally what happened was my brother was in the Jingle business as a recording engineer. This company was looking for a second sales rep, which meant I took their work around to all the biggest advertising agencies in the world, Leo Burnett, J. Walter Thompson, BBD&O, Benton and Bowles, you name it. And I ended up getting this company a lot of work. And then my brother and I decided we would leave that company, and I ended up he and I started this new company, and conveniently we called it the Hoffman Sound. Very innovative. This is my last name.
Well,
Hoffman.
real fast, Paul, just actually, can we circle back to, because I know when we talked about this before, I think there's one really interesting thing, because when you talked about how you went and sold those jingles, you did it differently because like you mentioned, you're really successful at it, much more successful than you had previous with people going out and selling it. But that's because you did it a little bit differently. And we kind of talk about this innovation and doing things differently. They had showed a certain path, but you brought a completely different angle and hook to it. So could you expand on that a little bit? Because I think it's really interesting and telling in the way that you started selling jingles and how it made you so successful.
Well, one of the things that I mean, there's a couple of ways that I kind of did it. So Kyle knows me. I am hardly bashful, and as you can by the end of this podcast, you'll realize recognize I am hardly bashful. And sometimes it works in my favor, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm a creative human being. I'm very creative, and that's I think big part of marketing is to be creative, and again to set yourself apart. So I'd go into these meetings. Now I'm not writing music yet, everybody. I'm still like imagining, if you will. And so I'd go into these meetings and I'd say, hey, man, you got any work after I present our stuff? They'd hand me a script. I'd look at the script. I'd go, that's interesting. And I'd sing them something. Now, I had no clue what I was doing, which was good because I didn't get in my own way, which is sometimes what marketers do. And so I'd sing them something, and they would like it. I'd run back to the studio. I'd get somebody who could play piano to pick out what I did. We'd present, and usually 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10 times we'd win. But what I understood about the whole idea of jingles again is like, so let's just use the metaphor of, okay, so a jingle is actually a message that takes people through an adventure and an experience. Okay. Now, a lot of us can remember some of the greatest jingles out there. I wrote, "Have you driven a Ford lately?" Now, I could sing that jingle to, many, many people, and people who, might have been, at the age group. I mean, 20 something probably doesn't know that jingle, but people that are a little older, I could sing to them. Well, sing me one of your famous jingles. I would say, "Have you driven a Ford?" And they'd go, "Lately," because they remember it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing about the whole idea of jingles, now to get back to what you asked me, Kyle, is memorability. Okay, so you want to be memorable when you do it. Now you want people to remember it. Now in the jingle business, it is kind of like marketing because if you're going to send an email out, or you're doing some kind of an email campaign, or you're doing a retargeting, or whatever it might be, there's always going to be a theme to it. Okay, and by having a theme, then you have a concept to hang your hat on, which then you can expand on. Okay, but if you're going to keep doing the same old, and your emails, using that as an example for a touch point, and your emails aren't interesting, people aren't going to open it anymore. Okay, but if your stuff is interesting, if your stuff is entertaining, don't forget that word, entertaining, then what happens is people look out for it. And the whole idea of virality or viralness, whatever you call it, is that you do stuff that's so cool that people are just looking forward to getting it. And then what happens is then they become raving fans. And as we all know, if your tribe or your community becomes your raving fans, they are your best salesman or saleswoman, right? And so the whole idea of the jingle thing for me was, so when I sit down and write a jingle, I mean, eventually I realized I needed to teach myself to play. And I'm not a great player, folks. I mean, I play enough to be dangerous, is what I tell people. I play enough to be dangerous, but I'm a really good composer, okay? And I have a recording studio and my brain technology and whatever. But the whole idea of how to write a jingle is, when I'd sit down and write a jingle, it would be the same process I do now if I'm going to write an email, or if I'm going to create a sales letter, or if I'm going to create a product or a program. I sit down and I figure out, okay, why is this something that people would want to consume? Okay, what's the unique quality of it? We all heard about a USP, unique selling proposition. I don't worry about that. How is this? So if I'm in the health world, okay, which I am in part of my stuff, if I'm in the health world, if I keep talking the same speak that most people in the health world do, then people are going, Jesus, man, I've heard that stuff forever. But if you can set yourself apart by bringing something that's unique into that conversation, because as we all know, an email or a text or a sales letter or whatever is just a conversation. It's really a one-to-one conversation. Now, we might think, well, it's one-to-many because it might reach many people. But at the end of the day, if I open up a page and I'm going to read a page, it's me and the page. It's one-to-one. So you need to be one-to-one in your messaging. And then when that one-to-oneness becomes so anchored and so good and so inspiring, then what happens is it'll get out there and people will appreciate it. So I really think about, okay, what's my message? What do I want to do? So when I was asked to write "Have you driven a Ford lately?" I did my due diligence. Okay, so here, because the campaign, which I also wrote before "Have you driven a Ford lately," was called "Look Out World, Here Comes Ford." Okay, which was the bridge, if you will, to "Have you driven a Ford lately?" And I just got to say this real quick. The one of the greatest moments, defining moments, by the way, when I wrote "Look Out World, Here Comes Ford," Tony Bennett sang it, right? Which was awesome. Now, if anybody, I'm a big Tony Bennett fan. I think he's obviously amazing. But I remember being in the studio with Tony Bennett, and I've had a chance to work with a lot of famous people in the Jingle world, and not to drop names, but Tony was hilarious because Tony would sing it, and Tony's got a little bit of an accent. So Tony would sing, "Look out, world, here comes Ford," F-A-R-D, Ford. And so it took me about 30 minutes. So I'd hit the talkback button. I go, "Hey, Tony, I need a little O on Ford." "Look out, world, here comes Ford." "No, Tony, I need a little O on Ford." Finally, I got the O on Ford, okay? And then I said, "Tony, we got it. Thank you so very much. It's awesome." He said, "Paul, I kind of like this song. Do you think I could sing it a little bit more?" And it was like, oh, that was just awesome. This is just a nice thing. But see, you want to obviously get your messaging. And so sitting down and write "Look Out World," "Have you driven a Ford lately?" It was like, okay, there's a lot of car companies, right? And this is my thinking, a lot of car companies. And there was a lot of popular jingles out at that time for cars. How can I be different? What can I do to make it different? And so that's how I went into thinking about it. And then it was all about, okay, so if that's how I'm thinking, or that is how I'm thinking, now how am I going to change the mindset, or what I call mind state, of people who are looking for cars? Because there's you watch any sporting event on a Sunday, there's, I don't know, 7 or 8 car commercials. They're all different.
Yeah. I mean, that
right?
is.
But how can you be different? How can you get into the mind state of somebody who's looking for buying a new car or buying a used car, whatever it is? So I went from, okay, here's how I believe I can set myself apart musically, and message wise, because nobody knows this, but the "Have You Driven a Ford Lately" has a full song. It's a full song. You go on YouTube and find it. I said, "What do you mean there's a full song?" Yeah. So the lyric basically is, "When was the last time you had a car like this to drive? Talking about the kind of car that keeps the road alive. Remember when? How long has it been? Put the key in, put your foot down, let it go. You'll get that feeling again. Have you driven a Ford? Have you driven a Ford lately?" Right. So we crafted the message so that, being that the tagline was "Have you driven a Ford lately?" meaning you really don't know what you're missing, man. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Yeah.
So that was the mind state. So that's the mind state, of course, in when you're doing marketing too, which is, okay, is your message really clear and concise, and are you able to communicate it in such a way that people get it like this? Because Kyle, you and I both know, man, your attention span, my attention span is maybe like that, right? Some people's is like that,
Yeah.
but your attention span, right? So anyway, so your mind state, and then what happens is you then are writing from a place of confident knowing that the communication and the message that you're trying to portray to people is touching them emotionally. Okay. I don't, one thing about me, and maybe this will get me in trouble, but that's okay. I don't really care. Is this whole idea of talk to your pain points, right? I'm interested in talking to your inspiration points. Okay. Yeah, we all got pain. Yeah, my product can help this pain point by doing X, Y, and Z. I'm looking like my product can inspire you to live your best life by doing this, this, and this. And so the Jingle world got me to think that way because, first of all, Kyle, I got 30 seconds to work with. Okay? Now, there's minute jingles, of course, but I got 30 seconds to work with. And if I don't get you in the first 8 bars,
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing like an email, or it's the same thing like a text message, or it's the same thing like a headline. If the headline doesn't grab you immediately, people are going to go next. They're going to
Hmm.
move on, right? So it taught me the whole way of being very um, uh, focused and intentional with how I would write the stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd write a jingle and start with a hook, right? Sometimes I write a jingle and I'd write the verses first and then the hook.
Hmm.
So I was more interested in taking you on a journey and an adventure that had a payoff at the end of it, but you felt full and consumed by something that inspired you.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does, and I think what's really interesting is you said that I hadn't really thought about. I don't know if I can name a negative pain-oriented jingle. I can't sing one. There's none that pops into my head. Um, and like it's really like I'm sitting here thinking to myself, it's really challenging. And now it makes me ask the question myself. I wonder if you did a study on the length of songs and the average length of a happy song and the average length that we can really deem a sad song, pain oriented songs. And
Uh-huh.
that I would imagine pain songs tend to be slower. They tend to be, I would imagine, probably longer because pain's something that we build to in music, and we wade around in that pain, which is not a good vehicle for a jingle at all. Yet when we think about it too, what you're doing with that jingle, if we go back to Have You Driven a Ford lately, what that whole lyrics and everything builds around inspiring you to love to drive again. And oh, by the way, Ford is the one to do that. Hey, you love the idea of being on the road in a car, driving in the best way possible, feeling the road, like you said, come alive. That line stood out to me. And you're
Right.
going through all these inspirational feelings of driving, and then it finishes with have you driven a Ford lately? I won't sing it because I don't want to butcher the jingle, but I think that's really, really interesting. It's really interesting too when you think about the way you're constructing your mediums and your timing for marketing, and what you could do with music in that. And I just find that really interesting. Yeah, because I think pain sometimes could be easier to focus on because it's just right there
Yeah.
on the surface. Inspiration, what
Hmm.
makes us happy, it's actually way harder to pinpoint and to gravitate towards. But when you do it, obviously it could be very memorable. It's something that now anytime I'm experiencing a good time, that inspiration come along with it. So I found that really interesting. The other thing I think, I mentioned it before, and I'm curious as you start talking about it, I'll get us back on track. I just thought that was a great point you brought up there. Is you mentioned sometimes you start with the hook. Can you talk a little about
Yeah.
what you mean with starting with the hook and maybe give an example of that? Because I think I've just seen a lot of marketers make the mistake where they try and build a product without a hook in mind, and they really create some poor marketing, and they end up getting duds oftentimes. But I know you talked about this with me before, and I find it really interesting. But yeah, talk me through kind of starting with the hook and what that's like for you.
Right. And the so for me, the hook is what's going to grab. We all know what a hook is, but just to reiterate, the hook is what's going to grab your attention, and within the hook needs to be some kind of language and some kind of message that hits you right here, right in your heart, okay, and tugs at your emotions, okay, because we know that anything, when you purchase something, it's usually purchased from emotion, not necessarily necessity, if you will. It's
Hmm.
really emotion, right? And then if your messaging and your hook um, 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 can tune in and tap into that emotion, then what's going to happen is people are going to go, oh, they know what's going on with me. And so I talk, and I'll get to the hook in a minute. So when I just wanted to get this point out because I thought what you were saying was great. So the whole idea of not necessarily speaking to the pain. Well, the 7 ways to alleviate blah 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 blah, right? Or the one way to inspire you to look at where you're holding yourself back.
Hmm.
So it's a little different flip there, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to going, here's what's wrong, what I like to focus on, and I think this is important in marketing, guys, and again, it's just my take on it. I like to focus on what's working. Because if you can focus on what's working in your life, then you're going to want to do more of it. Now, not everything is working on all cylinders. We all get that. But if you can focus on what's working, or what's inspiring you, or what's empowering you, then you can talk about, you can have more of that as well through blah 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 blah. But so the hook, that's kind of how I look at that. So the idea of starting with a hook is if when I start to write, like, a subject line is a hook. Do you agree?
Yeah.
And and Hillary and I talk about this all the time. Hillary's my beautiful goddess. Kyle knows her. We talk about, if the subject line, and she's really smart about this, the subject line is, if the subject line isn't interesting, people aren't going to open your email. Now, I don't know how many emails you get, Kyle. I'm pretty sure you probably get a lot. I get a ton of emails. I got like 45,000 unopened emails in my inbox. Okay. Because I just, I gravitate to things which people will do, which is why you have to think original, and you have to think messaging, and you have to think, how you're going to get people to come down this path with you, this adventure that is really part of who they are. And if it's not, you're giving them the tools and strategies so that they can live their adventure. But the whole thing of if a subject line is like, hey, did you forget to open this email? I've seen that. Maybe if I've seen it once, I've seen it 1,000 times. So the subject line is a hook. So starting with the hook, for me, means that you're starting with the premise of what it is you want people to tune into, and the messaging that follows supports the hook. Okay, and the hook is what's going to grab you, man. It's a hook.
Yeah,
grabbing you.
Yeah,
and bringing you in, and then it's up to you to keep them in.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So
when I love the two, when you start with a hook, I think one of the things I love that when you start with that, it's really easy to test, even with just people around you. You mentioned, like, Hillary and going to her. It's like if you're writing a jingle hook and you said, hey, if I said this to you, and what's your thoughts? What's your emotion? Are you even interested in more? And so that's one of the things where lots of times if you start with a product, you're like, well, people just don't understand it, right? So you'll build all these things and then all of a sudden you realize your hook's off. So it doesn't matter what your product is because no one cares what your messaging is. But if you start with a hook that's really compelling people, I want to find out more, even if you don't have a product yet, you have something that someone's interested in. I'm going to go find that product. I remember we talked to Perry Belcher about product creation. That was one of the biggest things that was really enlightening that he talked about, was this concept that if they love the hook, the product will come. It's almost field of dreams a little bit. But I think what happens in marketing, we flip the field of dreams far too often. We think if we build it, because we all want to be Steve Jobs, that if we build something that no one asked for, that they will all come and just love it and get it. But I would argue that Steve Jobs didn't build something that we didn't ask for. He just realized a hook that when you explain to people and show them, and he must have, educated people on this hook, they're like, that sounds amazing to me. And it wasn't that crazy, because if you look at science fiction movies back in the 60s and 70s and books, smartphones existed, even in Star Trek, right? Like, we're talking on our phones and we're having screens as much as we could try and pop up with this idea. So we wanted it. It was just the technology wasn't there. We didn't think of it through this vehicle. But anyway, I think that's just one of those things where, if you build a great hook and then a product comes afterwards, they will definitely come. But it's all about that hook. So I just love when you start with that and talk about that.
Right, which is why, okay, and this just closes the loop, if you will, and anchors it, which is why the most famous jingles, going back to jingles, that you remember is, what do you remember? The hook.
The hook, yep.
The hook. Right, which is why, as I said, most people don't even know there was a full Foooord song. They ran it a couple of times, but it always ended with, have you driven a Foooord lately? And that's what we wanted you to go home on.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same thing in your marketing. Okay, so if when your hook is compelling, like you said, Kyle, when your hook is compelling, then what happens is people will immediately internally say to themselves, well, that's interesting. I want to know more. Okay. It's like when I tell people, Kyle knows me, guys. I like to create my own language. I think I'm original. I always say this again. I said it earlier in this conversation. There's a lot of noise out there, so I'm going to create my own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm going to hang my hat on that. And then it's up to me to create beautiful noise that people want to listen to. Okay, or consume. But the whole idea of being able to um, get somebody to drop what they're doing, um, because everybody's looking for the next best thing, man. Come on, let's face it.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for the next best thing, the shiny penny, the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get people to stop and hear what you're saying because they can identify with it, all right, then you're going to be off to the races. Okay, then it's up to you to keep up leveling and revising and so forth and so on what that message is. But the whole idea for me when I sit down to work on any kind of marketing speak is, first of all, you got to understand, I think, you know not everybody's going to like what you do. Okay, now, I used to think, well, man, people used to say to me, so who's your avatar? And I'd go, that's an interesting question. Everybody. No, no, not everybody's your avatar, but more people can become your avatar if you can define your avatar. You can have more than one avatar, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
You can define your avatar in such a way that, again, people will be able to understand it and move forward on it. But yeah, the whole Jingle thing,
One quick
Mark
question
got me.
before I actually, so we'll transition because we talked about creating your own language. We're going to jump into that in a second.
Okay,
But one thing that I'm
cool.
just really curious on, because we just mentioned how great hook, you can innovate, change things. How long did you guys run the campaign for Have You Driven a Ford lately? And specifically, because there's obviously, I know you talked about this before too, there's obviously like different time increments, and you're going to innovate that jingle and put new marketing, TV ads, radio, all that stuff around it. But that core hook, how long did you guys run that for Ford?
Uh, so we wrote it in beginning of 1980.
Mm-hmm.
They used it until the beginning of 1989.
That is crazy. So I mean, pause for a second. I think everyone just needs to really materialize that in your head. A good hook, like a great hook, like Paul came up with that jingle, was able to support and carry marketing for 9 years off that hook. So when you have
Right.
that good hook and good angle, it's not to say, like Paul said, you don't have to change. You're going to have to change the things around it. You're going to have to continue to
Yep.
reinnovate your skin, but a good hook could last you an incredibly long amount of time. And you can't talk about overexposure because Ford and their marketing department was definitely spending enough money to get as much exposure as possible, especially when you think about the 80s and all the problems the auto industry was facing in terms of the emergence of Chinese auto manufacturers. You had the gas crisis, you had a recession going on in the 80s, like lots of craziness going on to really attack Ford and their success. Yet they had a campaign that the hook lasted for 9 years, and they were putting tons of money into. So obviously it was working very well. So I think that's one of those things that hearing that and putting that proof behind it, that hook really matters. And as Paul said, making it something that's creative, it's different. So you have the formula of it's interesting, but also entertaining. Not only is great for a jingle, it's great for any marketing that we do, whether it's an email, whether it's a headline, whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's a TikTok. It's just really, really, I think, interesting, and something hopefully everyone really takes out of, because I know I am in this conversation, is, man, that hook, when you get that right, that's kind of the marketing secret sauce. So it's really interesting when you start there. So with that, Paul, you're no longer doing jingles. Well, at least not necessarily professionally. I think you're always musically inclined. But walk me through a little bit how taking this world of jingles, super successful, and then eventually you stopped and transitioned to what you're doing now, creating your own language, creating your own products, creating all sorts of stuff. So talk to me a little about that and what that transition was into, and what you're doing now.
Great question. So the again, being in that advertising world or that marketing world, it's just kind of opened my eyes to understand about the power of having I'm going to use the word suite of products, if you will. Okay. Okay. Now, if you're, I always tell people to stay in your lane also. Okay. So
Hmm.
I'm good at what I do. Okay. Which is, I call myself the personal discovery architect. People go, what the hell is that? Which is the only thing I want to do,
Yep.
because I'm, I guess I'm a coach. I don't like that word. I guess I'm a life coach. I don't like that word. I guess I'm a trainer. I don't like that word. I guess I'm a teacher. I don't like that word. And the only reason I don't like those words, everybody, is because everybody else says them.
Hmm.
And so when I call myself a personal discovery architect, my feeling and my philosophy is, if you want to develop something in your life, you got to discover it first. So you be unique. Be unique in what you're doing. Okay. Now, the other thing that I find with my marketing and what I'm doing, and I'll give you the idea of the products in a moment, is, so I have a brain technology that Kyle knows about, and it involves binaural beats, which a lot of people have done. Now, there are zillions of binaural beat products out there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you've probably tried most of them if you're into that. Okay. But the truth of the matter is, so when I was creating this product, it's called Sculptations, because my platform, or my system, is called Sculpting Your Life. And the metaphor for sculpting your life, so all my products are about sculpting something, okay? Which is, I love that whole idea, because when you're sculpting something, you're creating something original, as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
And so the metaphor for sculpting your life is, when Michelangelo looked at the block of granite, which was flawed, cracked, discolored, just like human beings are, and so forth, he saw David. And all he did was take everything in the way out of the way, and there's David. So when you're creating in your life, the products that you're creating in your life, or doing whatever you're doing in your life, you want to come from a standpoint of really anchoring who you truly are, and then everything that you do in your life supports that. Okay. I'm not interested in living my life the way somebody else wants me to live. I wrote a song once for a good friend of ours, Brendan Burchard, right, through my company, Success Songs. And the opening line in the song's called "Today's the Day." The opening line is, "Today's the day I get to say I'm living life in my own way."
Yeah.
Okay. And that's kind of what it's about. Okay. And so if I get into trying to do things that really aren't in my skill set, or outside my lane, outside my thing about expertise, then I'm going to dilute the power that I have in creating what I want to create. So sculpting your life, again, was that metaphor, the whole Michelangelo thing. And once you learn how to get out of your own way, which I think is what everybody has a problem with in life, because the biggest obstacle to success, I don't care who you are, is you.
Hmm.
And once you get out of your own way, then that's great. So I have a product. This is now getting back into language. So I have a product, my binaural beat product. So there's a million binaural beat products out there, or zillions, whatever. So as I'm creating this product, I'm thinking, okay, how can I do it different? Binaural beats are binaural beats. I mean, it's science. Okay, there's alpha, beta, theta, gamma, delta binaural beats.
Hmm.
They are scientifically in between two different frequencies. Okay, and so what can I do that's different that would set me apart? So what I did was, I added heartbeat and breathing patterns to it. Okay. And a good buddy of mine, Paul Shealy, some of you might know him. He and I created some products for his company called Learning Strategies. And so one of the things we did on that product is we did this technology. So I took binaural beats, heartbeat, and breathing patterns, and I put it together, and I called it multivariant resonant technology. Very, very fancy. Okay.
It sounds so
MRT for
fancy. I
short.
feel like NPR would be reporting on this for sure.
Right. It's called MRT for short. But what it does is it activates the four holistic intelligences: spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional. And so that became part of the marketing speak, if you will.
Hmm.
So it's not just binaural beats; it's multivariant resonant technology.
Hmm.
So as you see, there's a little bit of a different spin on that.
Yeah.
And then what we did was, so again, as you know, Kyle, if everyone's going right, I'm going left. So I believe in this concept called meditation. Okay. But I think it's a word that's used quite a bit out there, and I think I know there's many ways to meditate, and I know that meditators, I know this for a fact, most meditators are always looking for the next best way to meditate.
Hmm.
They always are. Okay. And obviously, the biggest stigma about meditation, I was talking to somebody about this morning, is, people say, well, geez, I don't know if I'm doing it right. There is no right. There is
Yeah.
no wrong. Just sit and so what I decided was, I'm not going to call my stuff meditation. I'm going to call it tuning in.
Mm.
Right.
Oh,
And
that
a lot
is
of people like
interesting.
that.
I do like that. As somebody that's like has played around with exactly what you're talking about. Like I'm always looking for a new way to meditate. So I actually really like that. So that's interesting. That's really interesting. Great
Yes,
job.
so I call it tuning in, bro. And I'm not. I mean, it's not like it's rocket science, because I
Hmm.
mean, I must hear the word tuning in 100 times a day in different
Yeah.
conversations, if you will. So the whole idea of tuning in. So I said, okay, if that's what I'm going to call it, and if I'm going to then try to brand that, Kyle,
Hmm.
then I've got to figure out a way to make the bridge between tuning in and meditation.
Hmm.
So it sounds like it's the same thing. Does that make
Yep.
sense?
Yep.
So my tagline for Sculptations, which is the brain product,
Hmm.
is called, the tagline is tuning in, a higher form of meditation.
Ah, nice. Okay. So you're building that
So
tagline into what your own new
that,
language is, and you're building it into the idea, if I'm a meditator that's always looking for a new way or a better way,
try
it's directly
try tuning in.
communicating and contacting with me. I'm like, yes, please, I want to, because I know that meditation's good, but boy, I know it could be better, because I'm not sure I'm even doing it right. So mainly because I'm like, I'm
Right,
pretty sure I couldn't light myself on fire and not move like those monks, so I probably
right.
have some work to do.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want you to do that, brother. Okay, because I like you, and I like hanging out with
Yeah.
you. And the other thing about that, just quickly, about the whole tuning in thing is that, if it, when most people are trying to meditate, I'm just talking about that,
Hmm.
for instance, because that's one of my
Yeah.
products, obviously, is a lot of people, and I don't have arguments, I have disagreements sometimes with people about this. The whole idea of sitting down, I'm going to sit down. Somebody says to me, I'm going to sit down and meditate, or I'm going to sit down and tune in, and quiet my mind, right? I always say, well, good luck, because your mind is not designed to be quiet.
Hmm.
But and your mind is designed to seek what you put in it.
Hmm.
So if you want to do something that takes you to the next level in your life and tune into that frequency, then tune in to the activeness of the what your mind is bringing to you, and be active in placing in your mind what you want to manifest,
Hmm. Yeah.
and then let it flow.
Yeah.
That's, anyway, my take. So we could talk ad infinitum about that, but
Yeah, yeah,
but so that's
we'll pinpoint that, because I definitely want to have a tuning in conversation with you. But to circle back,
right.
one thing I think is really great that you just shared here, I think it's really powerful, and we can kind of circle back in here, is through creating your own language, your own branding. One, you already do what we talked about before. You're not going left with everyone else. You're going right, creating a path and a lane that sounds and looks different, making it interesting. On top of that, when I think one thing that I love that you're talking about here is creating your own language for your buyers, for your consumers. It gives them new ways to describe things that everyone else already knows about, or maybe not knows about, but has potentially heard about. And now it's new and
Hmm.
exciting, which for them makes them excited to talk about it. So when they say, hey, I'm going and tuning in, they know people are going to, like, what are you talking about? Tuning into what? Netflix? Like, is there a new HBO show I should watch? Like, no, 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 hold on. Let me explain what this
Right.
actually means. And they get the purpose behind
Right.
it. They become a person of interest. You create raving fans because they're interesting to other people. They have a different language that they could use. Now, if it was just meditation, they said, hey, I'm going to go meditate with this new product I have. It's almost like it creates a collective eye roll from everyone else, because they're also hearing about it all the time. So with that hook tied with unique language, now we have a unique brand that creates raving fans and raving interest, because we have interest in entertainment yet, right? That's kind of your equation for virility. And I think that's really, really
Yep.
powerful. And one of the things, again, is we go, how do I do this in my own business? I think first off, it's sitting down, like you said, finding, discovering what everyone else is doing, and asking yourselves, how could I be different? What's the language I could use that sounds different, uniquely to me? I think that's the other piece in there that this is really, really powerful with, is just like we go back to the basketball example, way, 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 way back when you didn't succeed because you weren't uniquely you, right? You were the you that you knew to that point, but you got into a pond that was too big. It wasn't going to work anymore. A good marketing metaphor for that is I'm very successful in very niche marketing. I sell to goat farmers. I don't know why goat farmers is an example I always use, but I sell to goat farmers. And I know the language of the goat farmers. I want to expand my marketing beyond that. And I can't. I continue to fail. I want to go to general farmers. My technology, my product might work for them, but I only know the language to this. And it's similar to that in high school, you were the big man on campus all the time. And as soon as you went to a bigger field with more competition, more people, all of a sudden those same skills, that same skill set didn't translate because it's the same thing they're doing, but they're doing it bigger and better. So when we go to that, it needs to be creating and innovating within self, I guess almost not even within market, right? It's within self first. What sounds like language you can consistently write, marketing you consistently write, whatever it is, it has to come from yourself. And then from that, develop your hook, create your language, have your brand, and that really feels like where a viral campaign could start. And all of a sudden, you're Foooord running the exact same campaign for 9 years, not the same campaign, but the same hook for 9 years. So I think that's really interesting.
And then you're always refreshing. But again, it's to use a very common term that we all understand in marketing. I call it unique, but you want to have your unique voice, which sets you apart. So it's again, so that's my example for sculptation. So again, my overall platform is called Sculpting Your Life. I talked to you about the metaphor. My tagline. So we are all right here, right now. You have everything that's necessary within you right now to create the epic ideal life you want to live. So Sculpting Your Life is about sculpting the masterpiece known as you. Because you're a masterpiece.
You're my own David.
You are your own David, bro. Once you chip away and get everything that's in the way out of this masterpiece known as Kyle, my God.
Yeah.
Just think about that, right?
And I just hope I have a bigger leaf, Paul. That's all. I just want the bigger leaf.
Well, bro, that's another conversation, okay? But so that's the way that I communicate sculpting your life, right? And I have a course called the 12 Dimensions of Sculpting the Masterpiece Known as You. It's very intensive, and it takes you through a journey from where you are to where you can become. And then so my other products you all know is I got into this business writing songs. So I have a company called Success Songs. Many of you know who T. Harv Eker is. So T. Harv Eker invited me to come to his Millionaire Mind Intensive one year. I went to it. I sat down for 3 days. It was like my first foray into the PD world. And I sat there for 3 days, and the guy's a great teacher. And then after the event, he comes up to me and says, "Hey, man, what'd you think?" I said, "Harv, you're a great teacher, man. Your music sucks." He said, "What do you mean my music sucks?" I said, "Well, you write use every cliched money song out there to fit into this principle called the Millionaire Mind Intensive, which is, of course, to change your money blueprint. Because if you think you're poor, you are poor. But if you think abundant, then guess what? Abundance starts to flow to you because you're in that intentional frequency, which is very important when you're doing anything, to be in the intentional frequency of what it is you want to create." And so he said, "Well, what do I do about that, Paul?" And I kind of like that. "Well, Paul, what do I do about that?" And I said, "Well, Harv, I'll write you a song." So I wrote him a song called "I've Got a Millionaire Mind." Now, the name of the course was the Millionaire Mind Intensive, right? And so I wrote a song called "I Got a Millionaire Mind," and it was awesome, right? And so he comes up to me after I sing it live. He says, "Hey, man, can you write songs for all my courses?" And I said, "Yeah, if the deal's right, I can do anything," which is a negotiating term, everybody. I want you to hear what I just said because you should use it. If the deal's right, I can do anything, okay? After I wrote for Harv, all of a sudden Jack Canfield called me, Brendan called me, Marcy, all these people called me, wanted songs. So I created this company called Success Songs. And these songs change your mind states, behaviors, and beliefs. But here's the hook. So you hear life from a higher vibration, right? And I mean, I've got my songs have been around the world, but for Success Songs, and then the other thing. So then I have another product called Good Morning Great Day. Now Kyle knows this. I have a morning ritual that I do every day, and which I think is important, folks, for everybody to do, because if you start your day looking at this, it's game over for you. Okay, because now you're giving your power over to something outside of you. So don't do that. Okay, we can get into that in another conversation. But so Good Morning Great Day is teaching people how to create a morning ritual, right? And I got a book deal for it. So I have a book deal. It'll probably hopefully come out in about 6 months. It's a 365-day book, and I think it's going to be really powerful. But I've now created a course around it, which is called Good Morning Great Day. Tagline for Good Morning Great Day is really simple. It's your day, make it a great one, right? And then so I think that's how I think, and all the things that I do, I think about. Okay, here's the overreaching concept. Okay, now how can I nut it down so if somebody says, "Oh, did you hear about? Have you listened to Success Songs? Man, they take me to a whole new vibration. Or have you heard about sculptations? Man, have you tried tuning in? Just like you said. So again, it's all about being able to give people the not hitting them over the head with it, but going like putting something into their consciousness that then spurs a deeper connection to even higher frequencies of consciousness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think just that idea that, again, what you're doing is you're taking this big overarching concept and you're coming down to specific language, specific hooks for different parts of it, right? There's part with Success Songs. There's parts of it with sculptations. There's part of it with the book deal that you have going on right now. Every one is a different channel, a different way to access and create that exact same kind of concept with a different hook to a different audience, different avatar, but all having that same effect that's really driving you. I think that's really powerful. And Paul, again, this was just an amazing conversation. I mean, we could probably go on for hours and hours, but we're not Joe Rogan podcast, so we won't do that. Before we go, though, I always like to give people an opportunity. You share what you have going on, but if people want to get a hold of you, what are the ways they could do it? Should they be following you on social? What are the ways that you'd like people to reach out to you if they have a burning question, desire to connect, whatever it might be?
So Kyle knows me too. I'm ladies and gentlemen out there, my ClickBank folks, my ClickBank peeps, if you will. I'm a lunatic, okay, and I love that, and I claim it and I own it. So website sculptingyourlife.com, SCULPTINGYOURLIFE, sculptingyourlife.com. You can go to that site and see all my other stuff in the product tabs and so forth. The other thing I like to tell people is if you really want to get in touch with me, and a lot of people just sometimes, I mean, he's so busy he wouldn't talk to anybody. I have time for everybody, okay, just so you know. So here's my personal email. It's Paul Hoffman, my name, HOFFMAN, Paul Hoffman, the number 24 at gmail.com. Now, here's the other thing I'll do for you too, because then people think I'm crazy. Here's my cell phone. Ready? 323-810 5588 323-810-5588. If you got any question, if there's any way I can support and serve you, please reach out to me. And if you don't, that's on you. Okay, but I'm an open book. If there's a way for me to help support you, then I will, and if there's not, I'll find a way to. But again, paulhoffman24@gmail.com and 323-810-5588, my cell phone. I look forward to hearing from you all. And Kyle, what can I say, bro? You're one of my closest and dearest friends, and you are a testament to what it's like to be a beautiful light in people's lives. Bro.
Man, Paul, I feel like we always have to do like a superlative like off or something. Who could say the nicest compliment? Because you are truly amazing, an amazing journey. We didn't get to talk about the amazing transformation you made in your life to become the fantastic person we got to interview today. But not only was it inspiring, which I think it's hard not to ever be inspired when someone talks to you for an extended period of time, but also very informative. So I really, really appreciate that. I hope all the listeners appreciate it as well. And I could tell you that Paul is not kidding around, that is his email, personal email, and personal cell phone, as I have both. And I know that those are real. So the last thing I'd like to say, though, is, again, thanks so much for your time, Paul. You're just one of my favorite humans in the world. I really, really appreciate it. But for everyone else, please rate, review, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if there are other people out there that you would love for us to talk to that just make you curious to say, hey, there's something else that, I just feel like I'm missing, or I'd love for you to talk to this person, please put in the comments. We do read those. We'll look at it and we'll go out and make sure we have something for you. It looks like Paul's ready for a quick sign off for us. So you could give us the sign off for today. Okay.
I got so you see, this is one of my this is how I sign off my emails. How I sign, if I do a Facebook comment, I always do boom boom, prayer, and a heart thing. And Kyle knows this about me, and so does other folks at ClickBank. And so my birthday was just July 24th, and they couldn't come to my party, and so Kyle said, well, we're going to send you something. So boom boom. So I say boom boom all the time. So here's what they sent me. They sent me a boom boom. This lights up to boom boom. I'm just going to find the perfect spot for it. But this is the kind of folks that I want to hang around with because they inspire me every time I'm with them. So I appreciate you, brother, and thanks so much for having me. And again, anybody out there, if I can support and help you in any way, please reach out to me and go out there and create what I call transformational havoc and live your epic ideal life.
Transformational havoc. With that, boom, boom. Have a good one, guys.
Boom, boom.